Hello, and welcome to this webinar today. My name is Bryant Wallace. I'm the CEO and founder of Scott Solutions. We provide managed security solutions to small business. And the goal of today's webinar is to help you and your small business to not be a victim of a cyber attack. It should be a pretty quick webinar. I hope you enjoy. And if you have any questions, I will have my contact at the end of the webinar. So I'll go ahead and get started. So right now we understand that there's a ton of attacks that are going on to small businesses and individuals. And in this webinar, I want to set the landscape and just kind of give you an update of how things are going. Also give you some techniques of what I use and the business uses to actually protect small businesses and individuals. So here's a quick CNN's video that talks a little bit about what's been going on in the landscape. So please take a listen.
It could be the biggest bank heist in history. Cyber attackers getting their hands on about $1 billion from more than 100 banks in 25 countries, including here in the United States. How is this possible? Let's bring in cybersecurity expert Gary Milewski to talk about this. Gary, I know I'm a layman, obviously, on this issue, so please help us explain. I don't understand the scope of something like this. How can you pull this off? How could anyone pull this off? 100 banks in 25 countries?
Okay, we're looking on the heels of the Sony breach, followed by the Anthem breach of 80 million records, including my own as an Anthem customer, and now over 100 banks with potentially 300 million to $1 billion stolen. It's all about remote access Trojans and spear phishing attacks.
Does that mean that someone had to do something wrong inside the bank first to let them in, or are they just able to get in because there is a clear vulnerability in all of these banking systems?
Most companies have the same vulnerability, and when people say this is a very sophisticated attack, it's really not. It's about patience. First, what they did is they understood how the mail servers work and the kind of messages people sent to each other. Then they sent an email with an attachment called a remote access Trojan, or a RAT, that looked like a normal file. Somebody opened that file by accident, and they didn't even know that it was malicious.
I think it's even, maybe it should be more troubling, the fact that it's not that complex in your words. It really wasn't that maybe difficult to pull off. It just required patience.
So that's a little bit of about how the attack actually occurs. And so the landscape is really stacked against you. You'll see that there are 55% of the companies will experience a cyber attack this year. That's over half the companies. And if a company is attacked, we'll see 60% are out of business within 6 months of the attack. As we can see, 91% of the breaches start with a phishing email, just like what was described in that video. And of the successful attacks, they utilize a fileless technique. We'll get a little bit more into a fileless attack. But I just want you to understand is that the bad guys are looking for opportunities to compromise individuals as well as companies. This is an example of a spear phishing email. This is a social engineering scheme used to spoof emails that are coming into your mailbox from what you think is an actual valid email. As you can see here, there's a couple of things that you look for, right? At the top, you'll see Bank of America, but it's not really a Bank of America email address. It's actually from Comcast. Also, if you look further down, they have some errors in grammar, capitalization. That's really done on purpose. That way they may not suspect, or you just overlook what was coming in the phishing email. And also, if there's a hyperlink, if you take your mouse and you hover over the hyperlink and wait a second, it will actually pop out what the actual email address is. These are just a couple of techniques that will help you identify if that email is valid or not. And if you have a question, don't hesitate to call the person that sent you the email. and just ask them if they sent it to you or if that email is invalid. What you'll start to see is there's a unique phishing report that I received. This is from second quarter of 2019. And you will see that as of June 2019, there's 35,000 of these phishing emails going out on a regular basis. So they're going for as many people as they can, just hoping that somebody clicks on an email. And they're sophisticated enough to really start to target times of day. So you'll see that at 9 a.m. there's a high spike in the number of emails that are being sent. And maybe that's because that's when you're starting the day, you're not really paying attention, maybe you haven't had your coffee yet. But they are very sophisticated about being able to figure out when is the best time that someone may click. And when we talked about earlier are the fileless attacks, you actually see that trend starting to spike up. And what that is actually that when the malware comes onto your machine, it's installed into the RAM. It's actually into the memory running. So it's able to bypass some of the older versions of the antiviruses. And that's where it starts to report back home. It starts to let people know that here's where the file is going to load, and then it's going to report back home, and that's where it starts to capture all the data. As you can see, that the regular ransomware where it gets installed locally, it's still popular, but it's not as popular as the fileless attack. And those are coming through the phishing emails that we talked about earlier. So, while again, they're sending them out a lot of emails as much as they can, but they only have to be right once. So we can't eliminate all. We cannot eliminate all of the threats. But what we can do is start looking at how do we reduce the risk. And that's why I look at ways of creating what we call layers, right? I look at three things: people, the process, and then the technology. Let's train our community, let's train our businesses, and train our individuals about what to look for in the phishing attacks. Make the phishing attacks spotting a game within the company so that people are now not so conscientious about being able to report it. Then we start looking at the processes we have in place. If you're getting an email from the CEO to do a wire transfer, double check, make sure that that was actually being done. So now, where do we go from here? It's not all doom and gloom. There's things that we can do to actually start to protect ourselves as well as our companies. I look at prevention. Again, training. Let's take as well as taking a technology assessment. Let's look to see what you have in the environment. Let's identify the data that is most critical to your organization. And again, create other layers. And then again, we start looking at the procedures. If we're starting to look at how an email or a wire transfer or anything that occurs inside the business, let's create processes around that. Detection. So we also want to make sure that we're using real-time monitoring, right? There's other antiviruses that are out there that wait until the definition's been updated and then does a scan once a week. I say, let's look at real time. We have some artificial intelligence in some of our tools that actually start to look at real time what's going on, and it actually can capture and prevent some of those fileless attacks. Again, we look at the layer approach. Let's start creating ways that make it difficult to go through multiple layers, such as two-factor authentication, making sure that maybe two people have to do a transfer, as well as let's look at who's accessing what resources. So when you try to put a document in the cloud for cloud storage and you have a user try to reach it, you want to know that that person has reached it, how long they did, because you want to make sure that they have permission to reach that. So we want to look at the access that we have to the resources. And then once we identify that something has occurred, let's go ahead and investigate that threat or the possible threat. Because if we can see it and we can stop it and prevent it from going on in and creating a catastrophe inside of your personal environment as well as your organization. Then we can start to remediate, clear it up, know exactly how they got in, resolve it so it doesn't happen again. And then we go back to review. And we go back to review, maybe we need to do more training. Maybe we also need to do some updates to our procedures. And so this is, again, the way that I look at preventing, then we detect, we respond, and we make it a holistic approach. When we look at cybersecurity, it's not a one and done situation. It's where we need to make sure that if we do something, let's make sure we're preventing it, and let's constantly look to upgrade and improve what we're doing. And that's where Wall Scout Solutions, we come in, because we actually have looked at different solutions and we create a layer approach to help your individuals as well as your small businesses. We have our desktop security, we have our email security and encryption, as well as our dark web monitoring, because we know that some of your emails and some of your credentials are actually being shopped around on the dark web. Let's put a monitor on that. So just to know that if things are being shopped, that means that you may be going to get attacked pretty soon. We also know as part of our procedures, we need to look at compliance and archive and make it easy for you to be able to manage some of your compliance regulations. We have 24/7, 365 support. So that way you know that you have a resource, someone that you can talk to if there's an issue that's going on, or if you just need to talk about creating some new implementations. Endpoint detection and response, that's where we have the real-time monitor, making sure that we identify possible threats and we respond to those quickly as possible. Then we start looking at the next generation firewall. That's where we can start monitoring the whole infrastructure and understand how all the data is happening across your network. And then we start using the SIM, and the SIM actually help us create reports, identify patterns, and just to make sure that we have a true understanding of everything that's going on in your environment. So that way, if there's something abnormal, we can actually address it. Again, I want to say thank you to everybody that had joined this webinar, but you can't afford business as usual. And these are just some simple statistics that we know that are going on right now. And for instance, 5 billion, the estimated total damages of ransomware globally in just 2017. Well, we know that's going to be higher. We absolutely do. So we actually have a link at the bottom of the page. Don't hesitate, look at the plans, see which one works for you, as well as you can send me an email, you can go to our website. We are here to help you as an individual and your small business. And we are looking forward to hearing from you very soon. Again, thank you for your time, and we appreciate you being here with us.